A superb article recently appeared in Forbes magazine entitled "Why North Korea Cannot Have Nuclear Weapons, but Japan and South Korea Should." It's hard to argue with the premise, given that Kim Jong-un continues to A, ramp up missile testing, and B, the two most likely targets are Japan and South Korea, neither of which have nukes. Despite the pronouncements of mental case Dennis Rodman, we know North Korea is a dictatorship that routinely violates international law and human rights. Therefore, we know North Korea cannot be trusted with this most destructive of weapons. However, Forbes writer Anders Kaur notes that if South Korea and Japan were to obtain nuclear weapons for defensive purposes, these nations would not experience sanctions or violent threats as do North Korea and Iran. At worst, these countries would get a slap on the diplomatic wrist. Although some would say that's hypocrisy, this whole idea that only select nations should have nukes, it really isn't an example of a double standard. Rather, allowing nations such as South Korea and Japan to nuke up is sound policy based on the core values exhibited by contemporary democracies. Kaur goes on to compare the most extreme nation that belongs to Club Nuke, namely North Korea, versus the likes of the US, the UK, and France. The latter three countries are mature democracies that have shown strong support for core international values like democracy, human rights, and international law. These nations aren't perfect, of course, but they're miles removed from the odious dictatorship that is the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea. Still, the likes of China and Russia are dead set against Japan and South Korea obtaining nuclear weapons. How odd, because the justification of going nuclear boils down to this: the sovereignty of Japan and South Korea resides in their citizens as well as their democratic rights and responsibilities that are established by law. On the flip side, North Korea's sovereignty resides with just one man who might be mentally unfit. Nor is this man one that supports democracy, human rights, or international law. It's therefore far more dangerous for nuclear weapons to be in the hands of a Kim Jong-un than in the hands of a democratic nation. So why is this situation being tolerated? Indeed, the current standoff in East Asia reminds me of the most logic-defying concept in the world of Star Trek. Namely, the United Federation of Planets are the good guys, whereas the Romulans and the Klingons, well, they're known for their brutal conquests of other planets. The Federation's military arm is Starfleet, yet Starfleet ships have a huge tactical disadvantage compared to enemy ships. Namely, Starfleet ships, such as the Enterprise, don't use cloaking devices, a gizmo that renders a ship invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. In fact, the Federation is actually forbidden to use cloaking devices thanks to the Treaty of Algeron, which kind of sounds like the Star Trekian equivalent of the Non-Aggression Pact of 1939 signed by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And we all know how that one turned out. In any event, Starfleet promises its ships will always remain visible and therefore vulnerable, whereas cloaking devices are standard issue equipment on the ships being piloted by the bad guys. But hey, at least an enemy bird of prey can't fire its weapons when it's cloaked, except when it can.
I can see you, Kirk.
Chang.
Can you see me?
Oh, now be honest, Captain. Warrior to warrior. You do prefer it this way, don't you? As it was meant to be. No peace in our time. Once more unto the breach, dear friends.
Tach pa! Tach weg! This is fun.
Yeah, nothing more fun than the enemy getting around a technical glitch, and nothing more fun than instantly morphing into a sitting duck. Meanwhile, back on planet Earth, it's time for South Korea and Japan to stop playing by the rules of Queensberry when dealing with a brass-knuckle street fighter. After all, the principle of mutually assured destruction ensured that the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union remained a Cold War. As it stands now, South Korea and Japan are like a couple of well-meaning yet ill-prepared Federation starships, completely at a disadvantage should that maniac in Pyongyang ever decide to press the button. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Like what you just saw? Then click subscribe below and never miss another Rebel video.